It's so funny to me that we can take so much time to try to explain to developers and producers and CEOs why we don't like a game, and it can go in one ear and out the other. And that is exactly what is happening regarding Dragon Age the Veilguard, because now the EA CEO is attempting to explain away its failure by claiming it didn't sell due to the lack of live service elements. I have a few different things to show off, but before I get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, join the community in my live streams, and consider supporting through Patreon or YouTube memberships. Now, EA is a company that has made many controversial moves over the years, so you would think they would want to listen to us as much as possible so they do not go back to the days of the loot boxes where people were boycotting them and people were furious with them and they basically became a laughingstock and a hated company within the industry, but they just do not care. And when it comes to Dragon Age the Veilguard, none of the people affiliated with this project, whether they are at the top of the food chain and they are directors like Corinne Bush, or they are at the bottom where they are just simply developers who are creating the product, none of these people seem to understand why we didn't like the game. And now Andrew Wilson has finally addressed the disaster that is Dragon Age the Veilguard, but his response was an out-of-touch one. Instead of acknowledging the real reason the game failed, shoddy gameplay, a narrative that betrayed the franchise's roots, and an overbearing focus on identity politics, he instead blamed a lack of live service elements for the game's commercial flop. This is very reminiscent of the people who say that, oh, single player games are dead and people only want multiplayer, because that's so totally untrue. Single player games are still absolute behemoths, and multiplayer and live service games can be as well, but you have to do them properly. You have to create them in a way that is not just, oh, we're making this game a free to play live service game and we're going to put the worst microtransactions as we possibly can into it. That is what people do not like. And whenever people hear live service now, it's instant red flags. Even look at games you have to pay for, like Kill the Justice League. That in no way, shape, or form should have ever come out, but it did, and it was a flop. Look at Multiverses. That was Warner Brothers' attempt at a free-to-play live service title, came out, and it absolutely flopped. These games are actually very rarely successes, like Helldivers 2. That came out and it did really great, but even that eventually died out. And now, instead of just acknowledging all of the real problems with Veilguard and why we did not like this game, he's blaming it on the lack of live service elements. Now, maybe this is just an elaborate attempt to sell live service to investors, and he's just saying, oh, well, live service games typically do better, and this is what happens when we don't focus on it, and this is basically why we should continue to invest down this path, but it doesn't make him look good regardless. So during the earnings conference call, he lamented the company's financial struggles, pointing to an underperformance of both EA Sports FC and the Veilguard. He of course admitted that it engaged around 1.5 million players, a number that fell short by nearly 50%. Now, this is very specific wording because they're not saying that it sold 1.5 million copies, just that it engaged 1.5 million players. And I do think that this number was bumped up a little bit by bundles. If you look at graphics card bundles or even Blue Yeti microphone bundles, they will add in games to try to butter you up and convince you it's a better purchase because you're getting an extra $70 worth of value on top of it, allegedly. This game is worth $5, maybe $10 if you really want to play it. I wouldn't pay any more than that, but they're constantly adding in different games to these bundles, and I personally don't think that they add that many players to the actual player counts. Look at Unknown 9 Awakening. It only has a couple of thousand people that actually played it on Steam, yet it was part of some of these promotional bundles. So we don't really know how many more people it brought in. It could have been 10,000. It could have been 100,000. We're not exactly sure, though I would assume probably 25,000. That would be my best guess. But then again, ultimately, this game did still underperform for them by a long shot. But of course, it's really no mystery why Dragon Age the Veilguard flopped. They can say all they want, oh, it was a lack of live service elements, but first of all, it was only okay gameplay. I did not mind the concept of it because it was very similar to something like Hogwarts Legacy, which I thoroughly enjoyed, but it still was not as in-depth. The characters, of course, were a massive problem between Tosh going on about their gender identity, and then you had very, very cringe-worthy characters that were supposed to be like funny or witty, like Emmerich, that did not, at least in my opinion, fit in a Dragon Age game. This title just felt like a modern audience or politically correct attempt at Dragon Age, which was very sad. It felt very juvenile. It felt like they were just trying to age down the franchise, which was not good. There wasn't really a whole lot of compelling storytelling here. The main plot was very plain, very cut and dry. You had okay environments, and like visually there was a lot that looked good, but again, a pretty coat of paint does not make up for serious structural issues, which this game most certainly had. And yes, the identity politics were definitely a turnoff for a lot of people. Having to play a fantasy dragon game and hear modern day terminology like transgender and non binary didn't sit well with a lot of people. Then you had pulling a barb, you had top surgery scar toggles, you had pronouns. Like, there are just a lot of problems that added up. And even if those were taken out of the experience, it still would not have been even close to a 10 out of 10, but it would not have faced such massive backlash leading up to release, which would have led to more sales. Companies need to realize it doesn't matter if your game is perfectly monetized or not. It does not matter if your game is a free-to-play title. If the storytelling is bad, if it is filled to the brim with identity politics, if you have awfully written characters and storylines, your game is still not going to do good. It, again, does not matter if it's got live service elements or not. That is not what sells games. What sells games is compelling storytelling and work and effort that was put into the experience, and that did not happen. It was shallow. It had such preachy writing. It overall was a nightmare of an experience, and it deserved to fail. And ironically, it says the Veilguard did start as a live service game, as admitted by its own co-directors Bush and Epler. They eventually pivoted away from this model to make it a single-player experience, with Bush claiming both BioWare and EA supported the decision. They probably saw that they had a lot of live service titles in the works, so they were like, well, we should probably put out one that isn't, just to see if it does well. And well, it didn't fail because of live service. Now Wilson is saying that the shift away from live service was a mistake. That directly contradicts BioWare's previous messaging that EA was on board with the pivot, making it clear that EA is now scrambling to cover for the game's commercial failure. And of course they are. They dumped hundreds of millions of dollars into this, and they have continued to ruin BioWare's image. BioWare has had a lot of failures over the years with games like Anthem and Mass Effect Andromeda, and the Veilguard is really a game that they needed to succeed, and it didn't. Now, if the next Mass Effect game ends up being a failure, that's it for BioWare. It is game over. But even if it was really good, there are still going to be people who are not going to buy it because they do not trust them, and there is no reason to trust BioWare after the shitstorm they pulled with Veilguard. And it's so sad because I used to really love BioWare. They're one of my favorite studios in the industry when they were actually making amazing, high-quality games, but they have not in a very long time. And I can't sit here and really give them any credit just because they used to be good. But of course, it is very funny to me to see someone like Andrew Wilson scrambling to come up with every excuse that he possibly can as to why this title failed, and it just goes to show how out of touch people like him truly are. Maybe you shouldn't have hired activists to make your game, and it would have turned out to be a little bit more successful. Put identity politics to the side. Give us genuinely awesome, high quality, fun entertainment again, and you will go back to making money. Will they learn from this? I guess we're going to see, but if the next Mass Effect game fails, that is it for BioWare. But that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, give it a like, and if you didn't, give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I'll talk to you all again in the next video really soon.